First of all, congratulations on this. It is a fantastic watch. Quite interesting in the way it's presented. Why did you choose for this to be a found footage type uh movie?
I mean, so it started in 2009 when, after Paranormal Activity came out, the found footage kind of, I could tell that movies like Blair Witch and Paranormal, I could tell that there was going to be a trend, like a wave coming up. So I initially started this as just trying to make kind of not a super original found footage movie, but just something that could like fall into that category of kind of first person POV, to where you could kind of help scare the audience a little bit easier by putting them in that, position. Essentially, the camera is like a fourth friend or a fifth friend, right? So it started off that way. And then over the years, found footage became so saturated, and so the market just got flooded with so many films that uh, a lot of distributors, a lot of studios, and a lot of just people in general just kind of got tired of it pretty quickly, because it got flooded so quickly between 2010 and 2016. So when we went back to go shoot it again, that's when we kind of made some adjustments, but still keeping the found footage element, because in general, I'm a huge found footage fan. I think it's just a really clever way of kind of presenting a film. And I think found footage really lends to the horror crowd because it puts you in the action. And so, for me, just being a fan of the genre, I just wanted to kind of make, like, I would call it like my love letter to found footage. Even though it's not 100% found footage, it's kind of like all encompassing. I have every kind of camera is used in this, every kind of style from found footage, all in this one picture.
Definitely. And another part of the structure of this is that it's a kind of a mockumentary style found footage. That's a very unique way to bring this found footage in. When did that decision come in? Because I thought that was a very unique element to this movie.
Yeah, so that came in later. That came in later. That came in around 2016 or 2017. From the start. The first version was called Malevolent in 2010, and the second version was called the Malibu Tapes. And it was around 2016, 2017 that I started noticing these ghost hunter shows pop up all over television. They became very, very popular, and not just the ghost hunter shows, but kind of true crime. And younger people just started falling in love with documentaries. That was never the case. When I was growing up, documentaries were looked at as boring and stuff, right? So, true crime documentaries, I think, really touched a nerve, and younger people really gravitated towards those, as well as just looking at kind of the way the Ghost Hunter show was growing, and just the way it was kind of presented, even though we kind of knew some of these things were fake, or just staged. It was very interesting. So when I saw that, it was like, hey, this is a good way to take the found footage that I have, that I've shot over the years, and put it inside of one of those shows, and essentially, you know, feed it to the audience that way. So it was really just a popularity of those coming up. And I was a big fan. I was watching those shows constantly all the time. So
Definitely. I know I got into a lot of those types of shows over pandemic. So going into the cast, this cast is incredible. I thought your monsters were great. I thought your documentarians were great, and even the found footage cast, they were amazing. They did their job very well. Uh, how happy are you with them, and how did you find these cast members?
well, first of all, thank you for that. I appreciate that. That's yeah, they did a fantastic job, I think. The initial four was kind of like a American Idol talent search, where we kind of just like had a wide open casting call for anybody who hadn't done anything before, or done anything major. So we wanted unknown actors, essentially. So we essentially just pulled as many unknown actors as we could into an audition process, and then kind of chemistry tested them, and tried to figure out who could improvise the best, not only amongst themselves, but with each other as well. And then the other four cast members, the paranormal investigative team, those were either friends or friends of friends that I like could trust. Like, I didn't have to audition them. I just already knew them and I could trust them. And with the original four kids, over the years, since I've had them, I've been working with them since 2010. there was a trust that developed very quickly by just hanging out with them and just getting to know them in general. So yeah, it basically was, it just boiled down to trust. But I do appreciate it because I do think both sets did a really good job, both the missing boys and the investigators.
Definitely, and your monsters are awesome. The mythology behind your monsters, was that something that you had heard of before, or is this something you created especially for this film?
So basically, I've lived in LA for the last 20 something years, and a lot of the stories you hear are a lot different than a lot of other stories you hear in different places. And so for me, it was kind of like taking bits and pieces of some things that happened in our country, in our history, that that actually happened, and then taking some mythology just from like the general blanket of a lot of the movies I grew up with, even movies like The Shining and like Poltergeist, like just having that like subtle backstory. This is a little bit more in your face as the movie goes on. You start to learn a little bit more. But yeah, just really, and there was a lot of things we visited. We went up the coast and we visited a lot of these caves, and there's a lot of these places still standing, and there's a lot of stories that come with it. So just hearing different stories, and this goes even to things like the Wendigo and things like that. You would just hear if you take all these various stories, there's a fairy tale aspect to it, and then there's a real history aspect to it. And so you try to find the right sweet spot that gives it a reason, essentially. So that's kind of how it came about.
Definitely, and usually when you hear horror story and Malibu, you think it's going to be a horror comedy. What made you take this a little bit more serious and create the Malibu Horror Story?
Yeah, so I didn't title the film. Actually, the title just came about early on. The film was called Malevolent, and then the Malibu Tapes, and then the word tapes got overused by found footage. There was all these movies called whatever tapes, and so Malibu Horror Story. They wanted to keep the word Malibu because it's kind of world, people know it around the world, and it just is interesting. And the horror story portion of it, like as far as like just making a film, I wanted to do something in a cave is really what it boiled down to. And I've been to a bunch of caves up in Malibu and in Santa Barbara, and some of them are quite scary, you know what I mean, to me. And there's a movie called The Descent that really I style wise I really kind of pulled from with the glow sticks and stuff. But yeah, it really just came about. Malibu was interesting. I go up there all the time, and I just kind of wanted to make a story about four boys that kind of go that graduate and go missing. That's pretty typical. We've heard that story before, seen that story before. But then the years later, having another group kind of come back and kind of dig into it, and then us as an audience, we find out at the same time they find out. So it was just something that Malibu just kind of fit perfectly, and we had a lot of connections in Malibu too, and a lot of pull that we could shoot. So
That's awesome, and I have to give it up for your DP. You felt claustrophobic when you were watching this, and then the cave aspect definitely helps with that. What kind of discussions did you have with your DP of how you wanted this film to look?
yeah, so I appreciate that question because you don't get that question a lot in found footage. You don't get a lot of composition in found footage films is difficult. You don't get a lot of room to really get creative. Like you have to get ultra creative, and you don't get to actually line up the frame exactly the way you want it, because it's not just improvising with the actors, it's also improvising with your cinematographer. You're kind of doing this dance, and you're right behind him with your monitor, just right behind him on his back, and you're also watching your actors act at the same time. And so with this, because there's so many elements involved, we used over 30 different cameras from 2010 on. I've used every single camera basically that was made since that. All three versions of the Alexa, every single like Panasonic, Blackmagic, Sony, those are all like B-rolls in here. But the three Alexas, the original Alexa and on. So we had this thing called an anti-grav cam, which is this giant monstrosity that lets the camera kind of float. And the reason why that really worked for us is because this movie is found footage. When you pull out of the found footage and you're in kind of the more traditional horror movie where we're not using the found footage tactics, if you stay in that found footage kind of style, it helps things blend better, and it helps all your layers come together more. And so essentially what it is, you know, you don't want to put the camera on the sticks ever, really. You don't really want to have it on a tripod. Now, from a director's eye, you want to get those really nice, say, wide shots or tight shots on the sticks. But when you look at the film as a whole and you look at the theme that you're creating, you know, you really need to keep the camera floating. And so Robert Morris, who's basically I grew up watching all his music videos. He did all the Eminem, Dr. Dre, Outkast, Blink-182 videos from like the late 90s. And I was a huge fan of Robert's. And so me and Robert have worked together forever. And so we don't really have to say anything to each other. We kind of automatically know where the camera should go. And in this instance, he's gotten the advantage of shooting this with me over a 10-year period. But yeah, the style was to make sure our found footage elements are 100% found footage. We don't break the wall. And then when we actually go out to our kind of traditional composition, we still maintain that feel so that you are tight in a tight spot. You know what I mean? So we'll use a wider lens to give you the cave walls on the exterior, just so you can see that, you know, there is no left or right, that you can't go anywhere, just to create that kind of, I kind of feel like it's like an anxiety almost. And if you're claustrophobic, like I love at festivals this year, a lot of people came out and they're like, man, I'm claustrophobic. Like there was some moments in the film where I couldn't breathe. And I love that compliment.
Definitely. And it seems like you've had this film going for a couple of years now as a director, and having all those years behind you. How do you feel now that, you know, you're set to premiere on and have an audience see this? What emotions are going through you?
I mean, it's a lot of work, and you know, I'm pretty exhausted, and so it's really just like a big sigh of relief. You know, it's kind of like a weight off your shoulders, even though each stage of this is a job in its own. You know, for independent filmmakers out there, you know, when you finish your film in post, and you're like, yay, you know, you still got the festival circuit to deal with, you know, reviews, critics, and then you've got the releasing stage. And the releasing stage is one of the hardest stages I'm finding. But I am extremely thrilled that it's finally going to come out and people are going to finally get to see it, because for a long time, I mean, we thought this was going to come out at one point in 2016, and then we went back to the well, kind of started doing some, you know, different styles and adding in different elements to kind of make it more, I guess, more palatable for a broader audience. And now that I feel like it's not just found footage fans, but I think if you just like horror in general, this is a film that's going to be up your alley. We kind of touch on all the elements. It feels good to have, you know, a broader audience see this picture now.
Definitely. Well, I enjoyed it. I watched it at 1 a.m. in my dark room on a big TV, so
Oh,
I can't wait to see it with an audience. So
yeah.
congratulations on this once again, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I'm glad you got to watch it like that. That's the way to watch it.